We're now into the second part of this lecture on research designs, and the first question that I want to consider here is to think about why research designs even matter. Okay, so let's take a step back for a second, and you can try to think about this yourself. But why would it matter how we design our study? For me, the short answer is, if you're trying to make a causal claim, I guess if you don't care about causality, then it doesn't matter so much. But if you are trying to make a causal claim, or maybe even a claim about correlation or association, then the design will certainly matter, right? So, for example, we were talking before about random assignment. Okay, if you don't have random assignment, just a basic integral part of any sort of experimental design, then there's no way you can assert that that treatment is in fact working. Okay, I would never take a COVID-19 vaccine where there wasn't random assignment. In the absence of random assignment, now, quite frankly, I've never been able to randomly assign for any of my studies just because of some of the ethics in social science research as opposed to natural sciences. But where random assignment is not possible, then you do the next best thing. You engage in matching. I've tried to use some variation of matching designs in my studies. I always try to use one of the first things I think about. I consider myself a longitudinal researcher, but I always try to structure my study in such a way that I'm taking multiple observations. I consider myself a longitudinal researcher, and so like I just repeated myself on that, but I try to make sure that I don't just have cross-sectional studies usually that I'm trying to publish, and so it makes a big deal in terms of the credibility of your study. Okay, I guess that's what I'm trying to say in short here. And so in fancy language, we're talking about internal and external validity. No one wants to use your study. No one's going to cite your study. In other words, your study isn't generalizable to anyone else if the design isn't well structured. Okay, if the causal mechanism isn't clear, and if it's not generalizable, then it's just not it's not very credible what you're claiming in your study. Okay. The reason why we have so much doubt about the basic designs and the internal validity of designs is because it's hard to establish causality. We said, right? Remember, we were talking about the three basic criteria to establishing causality. You need statistical correlations. You need to establish time order between your alleged causal mechanism, right, and your effect in time, and then you need to be able to rule out all the different factors that might have an impact on the outcome, and that's really hard to do. Okay, that's really hard to do, and there's lots of things that lots of factors that can infiltrate your study. Among the factors that can possibly infiltrate your study, I'm mentioning here 7 that are often cited in major textbooks, and so we're talking about selection, history, maturation, testing, instrumentation, regression, and attrition. These are the major factors that can infiltrate your study to shed some doubt, to cast doubt on the credibility, on the internal validity behind your study. Okay, so what does that mean? What do these things mean? First, in the way of selection, okay, sometimes there are selection effects. Okay, selection effects, the fact that your study is biased by selection effects, right? If someone says your study was biased by selection effects, that means that you're confusing your treatment, the effectiveness of your treatment or your support group, whatever it is that you're running. You're confusing that for some selection mechanism that occurred. Now, what that means is that basically that your study sample, the people that you selected for your study are quite possibly quite different from the people who didn't participate in your study, and so your results are skewed. If somebody says that your study is plagued by selection effects, that's what they're saying. Okay, so I give an example here. If your study was about examining the effectiveness of a GRE prep course, and you just took volunteers for your study. Okay, you said, anyone who paid for the GRE course, who came in and who took the course, right? I'm going to check to see if their scores go up. Well, of course their scores are going to go up. Most likely, people who have the initiative, who have the motivation to take a GRE prep course, volunteers are typically different from non-volunteers, right? Wouldn't you imagine? Okay, they're a little, they have typically greater levels of motivation. And so it's not that the GRE prep course was working. You're confusing the effectiveness of the prep course with the motivation levels of the participants, and so that's what we mean by selection effect. Sometimes there's a history effect that gets confused for the effectiveness of treatment. Let's say same example, right? The GRE prep course. There's so many different things that people are doing outside of that prep course, right? So you guys. Some people might be taking some high level math, right? I'm talking about So AP courses aren't as relevant here. So maybe that I need to change that. But maybe someone is taking a higher level calculus, right, as part of their schoolwork, and there's another student who's taken one math course throughout their entire undergraduate studies, right? And so while they're taking GRE, the GRE prep course, and so it's not the GRE prep course that helped them improve their math scores. It's all the coursework that they did outside of the GRE prep course that were confusing for the treatment effect. And so that's an example of a history effect. Okay, there's maturation. Okay, maturation refers to sort of developmental factors, right? And this is where the age of your sample often matters, especially if you have kids in your study, right? Kids are changing very rapidly, obviously, right? Both physically, emotionally, cognitively. There's a lot of things happening, and so maybe you think that your GRE prep course is working, but maybe you have a young sample, a very young sample, in which case our brains are constantly changing too. It's just that there's a lot of changes in the brain as opposed to the effectiveness of the GRE prep course. That would be one illustration of a maturation effect that's being confused for the effectiveness of the prep course. Okay. Sometimes you have a testing effect that gets confounded or confused for the effectiveness of treatment. Okay. Testing refers to just the exposure, just your exposure to some, to some treatment can often cause changes, and so. This in the context of GRE, this is to say that people who take GRE multiple times, right? Even if they didn't take the GRE prep course, if you were to take the GRE multiple times, most people actually do better anyway, right? It said that just your mere exposure to the GRE prep or the GRE test itself is going to help you score a little bit higher. Maybe maybe you didn't know what kind of questions would be on the test, and so the next time you take it, even without GRE, even without a prep course, your scores are likely to go up. Okay, that's an example of a testing effect. Okay, you step on the scale, right? You step on a scale before you start a weight loss program, right? You go into a weight loss clinic and you step on the scale. Just the fact of being measured, right, can cause a change itself. Okay, that's another example. Instrumentation. This is where the way in which the outcome is measured differs from pretest to posttest, right? It's not that you're doing better on the GRE. It's just that maybe they changed the questions on the GRE to make them easier or harder, and that changed your score. It wasn't the prep course, but it was just the changed questions on the test. Okay, that's one example of an instrumentation effect. You have regression. Okay? We have our good days. We have our bad days, right? Maybe you took the GRE on a really bad day, and so you had the motivation to go out and take a prep course. And then you took it again. The first time you took it, it was a really bad day. You broke up with your girlfriend or boyfriend or significant other, right? And then you would have done better anyway. And so regression, that's what we mean by regression, is that you're going back to your typical score or what you should have achieved in the absence of that really bad score or that bad day. Okay. And then you have attrition, which is kind of the cousin to a selection effect, where selection effect refers to, the participants in your study being different from non-participants. Attrition refers to the people who dropped out of your study, right? Sometimes you have people who drop out in the course of a longitudinal study. This is to say that the people who dropped out are significantly different from the people who stayed, which can bias your results. Okay, and so you think your prep course is working, right? You think the prep course was effective, but it's just the people who were likely to score the lowest, they dropped out before the end of the prep course, and so by post-test, by the second GRE, by the time the actual GRE was taken, right, the people who stayed in the course, the most highly motivated students, right, they scored higher because people dropped out of the study. Lower scores dropped out of the study, in other words, okay? And so this is all to say that we have to be careful about controlling for all these different factors and that's by making your design as robust as possible. So for us, as a practical matter, this is a matter of making sure that you have at least a couple of pre-test observations before we actually engage in our treatments or interventions.